This video was sponsored by the Deck of Many and their Big Bad Booklet series. It's about time I make another D&D story video. Oh, and yeah, I don't mean in general because I bless you all with a new animated vid like once a month or something like that. What I mean is that it's about time I make another story video on the Hollow campaign. So once again, we have Ingrid the Aasimar fighter and Akita the Tiefling cleric. For some bizarre reason, I thought that talking about a D&D session we played almost 6 months into the campaign was a good place to start. It was not. But it's been almost an entire year since that video went up, and since then I've had some time to reflect on the entire D&D campaign a lot more. And for every time I attempted to come up with a new D&D story talking about this game, I always ran into the same wall of a mindset, which was, dang, this campaign was so railroaded. And don't get me wrong, I loved all the player characters, NPCs, and the story that was a part of that game, but just because I loved the game didn't make it a solid campaign. Any experienced DM can tell you that D&D is a game where the player's goals are the most important part of the game. And for an up-and-coming DM that I was, with this being my first long-term campaign, somehow that never crossed my mind. So now the weeby D&D kid, Blaine Simple's here to tell you the story about every terrible decision he's made while playing this fictional dice game. Hopefully some of you who may be going down this same path can learn from my mistakes before it's too late. But before getting into the railroaded jungle gym that was the Hollow campaign, let's start all the way at the beginning. No, not that far back, get that old 2nd edition mess out of my face. There we go. My first attempt at DMing, and it was a painful one. First off, a lot of people recommend that newer DMs try running some official modules before creating their own campaigns, just to get the hang of how a narrative is meant to flow. Well, at first, I tried that by grabbing all my relatives to the table so we could play the noob-friendly Lost Mines of Fendelver. Now, I was quite the fickle pickle back then, and sorta still am, but when the first encounter with a group of goblins started and initiatives were rolled, I became a snail with the rulebook. So you weren't perceiving for danger, and the goblins were stealthing in the woods, so, wait, how do surprise rounds work again? There's something here on advantage, too. Oh, how many feet are the goblins from the party? Let me check that real quick. Does it even say that in the book? Yeah, so 2 hours of that session was just me reading the rulebook, and my total lack of improv just left everyone bored at the table. Most of us had a sour taste for D&D after that, and I felt things could have just gone better if I had more experience. Sometime later, I got myself into more online D&D groups, and eventually returned to my fam with a ton more experience in the game. Or so I thought. After managing to rope my 2 sisters into the hobby again, I decided to finally host another session. They were both so traumatized by our last dumpster fire of a campaign though, that I opted to running a homebrew world for them instead, which would end up becoming the Hollow. Now I've already described the Hollow in a different video, but to add some more detail, it was an open world sandbox game where the party could do whatever they'd like. As soldiers from the goddess Heaven's army, they could take on missions from a bounty board and complete quests pretty much anywhere on the map. Now, for a good while we played Quest Simulator, where Akita and Ingrid would accept a quest, deal with the issue, return to Heaven's Fortitude, get paid, and do it all again. We continued this cycle of play for a few months, until I started to attend community college for game design, and if I can say anything positive about those classes, it's that I learned just how male-oriented video game programming is as a job, and how to build an engaging story. Eventually, I put together a few new concepts for the Hollow campaign, and rather than have the 2 girls head back to the Fortitude undisturbed, this time something was different. Dozens of crows could be seen flying overhead and making their way off to the north. It was a bit off from the main road, and that alone piqued their interest. Turns out there was a girl who had some sort of weird power, letting her control the birds, and unbeknown to the party was super important to both of their backstories. But you're probably wondering where the railroaded aspect of this all comes in? Well, almost every event past this moment would be scripted, right down to the very core of Akita and Ingrid themselves. When we first began this campaign, both of the girls as characters had pretty much no backstory. Ingrid had a few lines of text where she was a famous soldier who died a coward in combat, and Akita was just Akita. Even if we fleshed out their backstories more, it wouldn't have mattered. Both of them were dead for 100 years before being resurrected, coupled with a terrible case of amnesia that made them forget literally everything. What did Akita die to? Nobody knew until around 1.5 years into the campaign due to the massive plot holes appearing everywhere. In fact, I'm pretty sure if I went to ask Akita's player if she even remembers what her character died to, she wouldn't even remember. It was that unimportant. By any chance, do you still remember what Akita died to in the Hollow campaign?
Not really, no. She died to something. Must have been important. She probably died from cancer or something.
And that, my friends, was one of the biggest flaws they could have possibly started the game with. Akita and Ingrid had personality, yeah, but what they lacked was some real motivation, and having their characters suffer from amnesia wasn't helping with any of that. Also, none of this paired well with the fact that I was getting into game design, and as most of you should know, a lot of my favorite games have really linear story trails. At one point, I even told them that I'd like to one day recreate our campaign as a video game, and we'd use the world of the Hollow that I created as a base for that project. So I was already comparing my campaign to a video game, which if anyone has ever tried before knows that if you don't do it ironically, it'll always end horribly. Don't believe me? Well, here's a quick rundown of the story. The Raven Girl was named Angel. Angel is the sister to Heaven, the goddess who rules over the left half of the world. The two girls are basically a single entity, but because of weird corruption stuff, they split apart into two completely different people, with Angel being the pure half and Heaven being the corrupted half. Yeah, I know you all saw that coming. Ooh, Heaven was a twist villain all along. Yeah, nobody's seen that trope before. Akita and Ingrid didn't know any of this though, and for a huge portion of the campaign thought that something was off about both of them. However, because they were freaked out about what Heaven might do to them if they pushed for answers, Akita and Ingrid just continued with the daily grind. Except now I was putting a bunch more side quests into the story to help the party figure out who this Angel girl really was and what they could do to help.
Wait, Angel's trying to create an army of super soldiers? She's also working with a super powerful vampire to make her powerful enough to kill a god? She was also my mother and was married to my dad, who also ended up falling in love with a vampire woman who also killed him?
Yeah, turns out when your players don't have a lot of written backstory, you can make up whatever you want. Things just got more convoluted afterwards, and I'll spare you the effort in trying to understand it. Basically, they were playing my campaign to continue the narrative, my story, and my character motivations. It was never about them or their characters, but my NPCs and my encounters. In almost 100% of scenarios, this always plays out terribly, because, like I said 5 minutes ago, the players need the spotlight, not the DM. What I think saved this game from ending like the first was that both Akita and Ingrid's players really enjoyed playing D&D, even if it did have a more linear story. Because we played it like a video game was what made the campaign so appealing to them. So if anything, I got lucky and managed to give them exactly what they wanted in a D&D session. Did I put the players' actions and ideas first? Definitely not. But did I deliver them a game that they enjoyed in the end? Apparently. Off topic though, there was also one beautiful little segment of this campaign that I thought deserved a bit of this video's time. At one point, the girls had a choice on either spending 3 days walking around a deadly forest or carving a path straight through it. It was a time-sensitive mission, and since they couldn't possibly make it in time going the normal route, wonder why, they ended up pushing through the woods where they found a swamp serpent looking to make a meal out of them. Ingrid got killed and eaten, and Akita managed to murder the serpent before it could eat her too. Turns out the beast had a ton of treasure at the bottom of the watery pool it was in, so Akita got curious and tried to collect it. Oh, Akita, remember that water witch you and Ingrid killed? Her staff can push water away from you.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm gonna jump down with the staff and grab the treasure.
Are you sure you want to do that? So, since the staff could push water away, she could make it to the bottom without having to hold her breath. But there was a much bigger issue than breathing, which made itself really apparent just seconds later. So, Akita, how do you plan to break your fall?
Wait, what?
Propelling water away from you also ensures that there's nothing under you to break your fall. Akita had a lot of time out of game to think of a solution, but otherwise failed to come up with anything and ended up breaking her legs on the floor. The water staff Akita had was also running out of energy, leading up to it turning off and drowning her. Akita and Ingrid, thankfully, could never be permanently killed, and after a week would always just get resurrected by the giant city fountain to try again. Once again, video game mechanics always work weird for D&D, but my sisters hated the idea of one of their characters permanently dying in the game, so we just rolled with it. Later down the story, Heaven was eventually fixed from her evil disease. The vampire queen was beaten up. A few NPCs the party loved were killed off for plot relevance, and all of the obnoxious gods and goddesses departed back to infinity and beyond, leaving the material world for good. In the end, Akita and Ingrid saved the world with the powers of gods and anime on their side. I'm sure this video will make the campaign seem like an absolute train wreck to some of you, and if you're not used to playing D&D in this style, well, then it definitely would be. But it didn't matter that we weren't masters of the rules or veteran storytellers. The only important thing to keep in mind was if everyone was having fun. Dang, that was a great campaign. Pretty upset that it's over. I think we all agreed, even though it had some bumps here and there and sorta everywhere, there was something magical about that campaign. For us at least, it still has a sense of nostalgia from one of our first and longest D&D campaigns to date. The important part was that I put my best foot forward when trying to be a good dungeon master, and that my players enjoyed the game and all the characters that were in it. Speaking of which, I'm sure a lot of you were curious on who the heck this vampire boy is, or why I also use him as a persona for my videos. Well, better buckle up and wait till 100k subs, boys, because I'm saving that story for then. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed the video, and a reminder that it was sponsored by the Deck of Many and their Big Bad Booklet series. Before you click off the video, does a giant multi-headed snail sound interesting to you? Well, these mad lads over at bigbadbooklet.com create epic bosses like these for D&D 5th edition, with plot hooks, stats, lore, and custom art included in every pack. Including them into your campaigns is as simple as downloading a PDF. If you want to surprise your players with a new quirky threat, check out the link down below, and I'll see you all in the next video.